As we're joined from downtown Jackson by the newly elected Senator Kamesha Mumford and owner of Mumford and Mumford Law, co-owner of Mumford and Mumford Law. I got to get credit to your husband there. We thank you so much for joining us. This is our business law class here at Velma Jackson High School, and we are joined by our my good friend Miss Adrian King, our U.S. history teacher, and then Casey Meeks, our government teacher, will also be joining. And we're recording this for all of our friends in Madison County schools. Madison Central, Ridgeland High School, Germantown High School, the Academic Option Center, and our YouTube channel. So thank you so much for fitting us in your extremely busy schedule today.
Oh, thanks y'all for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Now, but we obviously want to talk about your legal career and your new legislative career. But just give us a little background. You did go to Canton High School. We'll let you
Hmm.
make it over here in Falcon Land today. Went to Mississippi State.
I
You went to
did.
Mississippi State where you majored in poli science, and then went to MC Law there in downtown Jackson. So take us through
Mhm.
that journey of education and choosing your higher education, and then your law school journey.
Yeah. Like you said, graduate of Canton High School, class of 2000. I always knew that I wanted to be an attorney. I never thought of being anything else. I used to think that it was my idea, but as I've gotten older, I think it was probably more my parents' idea. And I just went with it, but they recognized certain gifts, talents, knew all my strong points, and really just led me to a love for the law. And so, even in my career track from Canton High School. Let me just say too, I was a 4-H'er, and so from the ages of 8, and I mention that because the Dixie National Livestock Show is in town, and I, along with some of my colleagues in the Senate, will be participants at 5:30
Oh wow!
today. I showed sheep as a 4-H'er. Tonight, I'm showing a cow. This will be my first time doing that. But I was
Wow!
really active in 4-H, and 4-H was much more, and still is much more than the livestock show. I learned how to sew, but the biggest benefit I got from 4-H was all the oratorical contests. We were always presenting project boards and having speech and debate competitions in my day in 4-H. And so I did that as a young student. I was in the Canton High School marching band, played the saxophone, section leader of that. And then as I started thinking about college, the original plan was for me to go to Ole Miss. We were about a month out from graduation, and I did not feel confident in my decision. And this is after I had been offered and accepted a scholarship. It was offered Mississippi State as well. And I just felt more at home in Starkville, and
Yeah.
made the decision at the last minute to go to Mississippi State. It was the best decision that I've made. Enjoyed my time there in Starkville. Finished in 3 years. I graduated in 2003 because
Wow!
I was in a hurry to get to law school. And so I wish I'd enjoyed it more. I wish I'd gone to more baseball games, but I enjoyed myself there. But I was focused on getting to law school. And so I graduated in 2003, but I graduated in December. And so that you couldn't start law school until August. And so I went back home to Madison County and worked for the Madison County Board of Supervisors from my December graduation until I started law school. And I worked directly in the administrative office. So I was there preparing board books, getting the supervisors prepared for board meetings, working on the dockets, that sort of thing from January until August when I started at MC. Um, Went to law school at MC, thought I was going to be a criminal defense attorney. Worked for a criminal defense attorney, second year law school, until I graduated, but then fell in love with real estate and real estate law. And at that point, that's when I started thinking about being in real estate litigation. And so when I graduated from law school in 2007, the housing market crashed. And being a real estate or at least a closing attorney at that time wasn't the best thing to do. And I still had all those connections from my time working for the Board of Supervisors in Madison County. And Arthur Johnston was the Chancery clerk at the time in Madison County. And he wanted to have a lawyer on his staff to work in tax sale compliance. And so Arthur hired me right after I got done with the bar exam before my results even came back. And I worked there for Arthur for about 4.5 years on tax sale compliance. I actually drafted the first code of ordinances for Madison County. The Board of
Oh,
Supervisors would make ordinances and spread them across their minutes, but they had not been compiled in an actual ordinance book. And so I
wow!
created that code. And actually, that was before I graduated from law school because I kept coming back in the summer to help them out. So that was probably around summer of first years when I dedicated my summer to reading old board of supervisor minute books and pulling out the ordinances and then creating this code for them. And then, like I said, I go back, work for Arthur as his tax ombudsman for about 4.5 years. Learned how to search my own title, which is a great skill to have. It's also, if any students are thinking about different career tracks, title abstracting, especially if you're someone that loves to put the pieces of a puzzle together. Title is like a big puzzle, and you're trying to fit all the pieces together. And so I learned how to do that there with Arthur. And then I got hired by a real estate investment firm based in Omaha, Nebraska. They were looking for an in-house counsel for Mississippi. And this is probably November of 2011, I think. So they hire me as in-house counsel for Mississippi. They were investing in tax liens in probably 12, 13 states. One of those states was Louisiana. And they mentioned to me after hiring me that they would like for me to also be licensed in Louisiana.
Oh, cool.
And me being the overachiever, I said, sure. When's the bar exam? Well, it was in February of 12, and we're November 11. And I'm a common law trained lawyer. I had no experience with the civil code, but I'm never afraid of a challenge. And so I accepted my position, worked full time, and studied for the February bar, passed it the first round, and then started practicing in both states, Mississippi and
Wow.
Louisiana. And then from there, I worked for that company for 8 years. And then my daughter was born, and I decided I wanted to take a different track because I was licensed in both states. I was traveling to Shreveport just about every Tuesday for motion day and then Thursdays for trials. And it got to be a lot, even though I enjoyed the work. The back and forth to Shreveport was just too much with my young family. And so my husband and I, at that point in time, formed Mumford and Mumford. We met at law school. He was a third year my first year. And then I just focused on real estate litigation. And then I started the title company a couple of years later, Mumford Title. And that's where we specialize in residential commercial real estate closings.
That's awesome. Now, and I
Yeah.
know that was a lot, and you're humble because you left out quite a few things, um, but I do think it's important because we before we started recording, our friend John Lasser has, he said I wanted to be like on Law and Order. We all see the
Yeah.
trial shows, we all see All Rise and Law and Order, and people are getting nailed to the witness stand, and that's such a small part of law. And I think
Mm,
people think attorney, and they just think people are going to jail.
yeah.
And that is such a small part of it of using an attorney because, like you said, in real estate law, and I have all young men in here with me today. I was telling them if you ever plan on buying a home or buying land, you're going to have to deal with an attorney. If
Oh,
you
yeah.
want to open a business, if you want to open a business in the state of Mississippi or anywhere, you're going to have to deal with an attorney. If you want to
Hmm.
adopt a child, you're going to have to deal with an attorney. If
Yeah.
you want to, heaven forbid, if you ever get divorced, you're going to have to deal with an attorney. So there are so many areas that attorneys have hands in that has nothing to do with anybody ever going to jail.
That's
And
right.
so many courtrooms that have nothing to do with anybody going to jail. Like our friend Tiffany Grove, who's actually my high school classmate, said, I've been a
Yeah.
judge and an attorney for 30 years. I've never sent anybody to jail other than contempt of court. So it
Yeah.
really is such a small area, but something people need to be familiar with.
Hmm.
Now, a big thing for me is, and I know you and your husband deal with will and testament.
Oh, yeah.
And what I was talking about with these guys is if something's not in writing, it's not legal.
That's
It's
right.
a handshake's not going to hold up in court. And unfortunately, we see in Mississippi in a lot of rural areas we have somebody pass away and the family's fighting over who gets what. So it's
Hmm.
important to have things in order. So talk about some of the different things you and your husband handle that people may
Yeah.
not realize attorneys are really needed in.
Well, estate planning is a large part of my practice just by virtue of me being in real estate law. What I see all the time are title issues associated with someone passing away without a will in place. And what I hear, especially in our state more than anywhere else, is people saying, well, grandma wanted Johnny to have this and
There you
me to
go.
have that, and nothing's in writing. And so I stress, especially in our area, the importance of just a simple will. There are other vehicles for estate planning that are in place as well. A simple will at least says, this is what I own, these are the people that I want to have it. But now we have our legislature a few years ago enacted the transfer on death deed, which will allow you to sign a deed now transferring your property to whoever you want to have it. And it doesn't transfer the property until after your death. So many people want to avoid probate, want to avoid having to hire an attorney when they pass away. In years past, people would use a life estate deed, but that had some issues, especially when you draft a life estate deed and then your mom decides she wants to refinance her house. Well, then she has to go get the remainder man to sign off on it. And so with the transfer on death deed, nothing transfers until the death of the grantor. And that's something that people can use. But what I've expressed more than anything is to not be afraid of a will. It's in some communities, it's taboo. It's like as soon as I draft it, I'm going to die. No. A failure, a failure to plan is a plan to fail. And just thinking about simple estate plans, we are more of a boutique closing office. And so I have a lot of first time home buyers that come in and I talk to them about what is your plan if God forbid something happens, you pass away, where's this house going? Let's start thinking about that as you're acquiring property. Because one of the pieces of legislation, and I know we're going to get into this, that I introduced this session was a Land Bank Act. And that's because there is so much property that's passing through intestate estates, meaning the person didn't have a will. We will have family members who will continue to pay the taxes, but the property is falling apart. And so I think if we create land banks in our state, which other states use land banks now to take care of blighted properties, we can eradicate the blight. But we can also give families an option to even transfer their property to land banks before their death if all of their children are in other states. And I hear when I worked for Arthur and was working in tax sale compliance, and we were just making sure everyone had noticed that they would lose their property in the tax sale. I would talk to some kid in California that says, that was my grandmother's house. I've never been to Mississippi. I don't intend to come to Mississippi. I don't care what happens to that property. Well, with our land bank legislation, they could actually transfer that property to the land bank. Don't just lose it in a tax sale. And so that I proposed that bill. One of my colleagues in the Senate proposed the exact same bill. Mine died in committee, but we both got double referred. His passed both committees. And so now we're working together to get that legislation through. But just thinking about other ways and really understanding the value of property, I think will help folks also understand the importance of estate planning.
Big time. Well,
Yeah.
that is a great segue because just this last November, you were elected to the state senate for a seat that had been occupied by now Mayor of Jackson, John Horn,
Yeah.
for pretty much my entire life. And
Yeah.
we had a special election which had several candidates in it. And we had to go to, I mean, I'm just trying to speed along. You were ahead after the primary. We had to have a runoff where you were victorious in the runoff and you were able to take office there in Jackson. And we've been talking about the lawmaking process in our class. I know we do in our government classes as well. And it is
Yeah.
something that I think is important because people think that just the governor just says, here's what we're going to do. The president says, here's what we're going to do. The mayor says, here's what we're going to do. And it does not work like that. There is a
Right.
process for every law made in this country. And you mentioned about proposing the bill, and then it goes to committee. So talk about how that process works. And I know even though you're extremely intelligent and more than qualified for this position, you've probably learned a few things yourself being a new legislator.
Oh yeah, I'm learning something new every day. And I have colleagues who have been there for decades who say the same. Every session, there's a lesson learned. I feel such a responsibility, though. Every day I walk into the Capitol, and so I'm soaking it all in. I told someone the other day I've been there about 30 days. That's how new I am, and I really did hit the ground running. But most other senators had an entire session to think about this session. I had a short period of time because I was still running for office. up until the election on December 2nd. But because I was fresh off the campaign trail, most of the legislation that I introduced was based on conversations that I'd recently had with citizens of Senate District 26. Now, the process of a bill becoming a law, it's not a simple process. It starts with that introduction, and we have drafters in our offices on the Senate and the House side who, I come up with an idea. Because I'm an attorney, most of my bills were pretty much already drafted before I turned them in to legislative services. But any legislator can come up with an idea, send that idea to one of the drafters, and then they start drafting the bills for us. That process can start as early as when this session ends for the next session. Um, for me, I had to come in with those already thought of, many of them already prepared. You will introduce those in your house, which for me is the Senate. And then the lieutenant governor will refer those to committees. Committees will meet, and I didn't mention my Senate committees, but I've been appointed to finance, workforce and economic development, constitution, labor,
Wow.
tourism, and veterans and military affairs. So those are some pretty good
Wow.
committees for a freshman.
Wow.
So those are the committees that I've been appointed to, but any senator can go to any committee meeting. So once the committees are assigned, then you have committee hearings. And so I am not on either of the judiciary committees. And most of my bills were referred to either Judiciary A or B. The bill that I got passed in the Senate on last week was referred to Judiciary B. And so when that bill came up on their calendar, I got a call from the chairman to come and explain my bill at the committee meeting. And so we had that hearing. I explained my bill. It passed at the committee hearing. And then the committee reports were due on last Tuesday. Anything that did not come out of committee at that point in time died. And so there were several of my bills that never saw the light of day. That's okay.
Yeah, but
Um,
but that's actually really common on the federal level, on the local level, on the
yeah,
state level. And bills get revised and put back up in front of committee. So sometimes it takes a little while for things to pass. That
oh
doesn't mean
yeah,
it won't pass, but there's definitely a process, and it's part of our constitutional system to have a system in place to make laws in our state and in our country.
that's right. That's right. When you think about 52 senators, I think at deadline, there were maybe 1,800 bills that have been dropped. And so everyone has ideas and plans to make our state better. And so they all can't be heard or won't be heard every session. But I use this, my very first session, to lay the groundwork for my legacy as a senator. And
That's
so most
awesome.
of my bills were, quality of life issues that could have positive effects on everybody in our community. That's kind of how I thought. But I did get some out of committee, and those were placed on the calendar. Um, Once they are placed on the calendar, it's up to the chairman to bring those bills up for vote. And on last Wednesday, my illegal dumping bill was moved from the calendar for debate in the Senate. And so once that happened, then it's my turn to go there to the well and explain my bill, argue, in support of my bill if there's any opposition, and then the Senate votes. And so on Wednesday, the Senate unanimously approved my illegal dumping bill. And
That's
so
awesome.
it was sent to the House. And it will be introduced. Oh, first, it has to be referred to House committees once it's introduced in the House, and then they'll have their hearings and go through the same process. They'll have to have their reports and place it on their calendar. They'll have debate, and then they will vote. And if it passes in the House in identical form, it goes to the governor for signing. He can sign it, he cannot sign it, um, and he can veto but override it. So the governor has some options too. And so it's not just a simple vote in the Senate and it passes, or even vote in the House and it passes. If it passes in identical form in the House, then it goes to the governor. If it passes in a different form and the Senate accepts those changes, it can go to the governor. If it passes in a different form and the Senate doesn't accept those changes, then we will have what's called a conference committee. And then they will have to reach an agreement, a compromise, and then send it back to both houses. And then it
Awesome.
will go to the
Yeah.
governor. And
Yeah.
so,
All right, well, they've handed me some questions. I'm about to get to those, but one thing I did want
okay,
to talk about, and you mentioned this about the ability to work together. And I always say local and state issues are not always federal issues.
right.
And I think we see that a lot, not just in Mississippi, but in other states. And I think something that young people need to understand as they start getting registered to vote, and we'll talk about that more in a minute. But you need to understand who your state representatives are. You need to know who your local representatives are. I always say just because you wait in line, and I get so frustrated when I hear people say, "Well, I woke up every morning and XYZ was the president, and I just felt better." I said, "Well, the president doesn't have anything to do with state issues and local issues that appeal
Right.
to our everyday lives." But then
That's
that
right.
same person can't tell me who their state representative is, and I'm like, that's the people you need to be looking at to make changes in our
Mhm.
state or changes in your city. Know who your alderman is in your city or your county supervisor in Madison County. So, and one thing that you did so well in your campaign is you really ran on the platform of we're going to work together. I'm not going to get in there and be petty. I'm not going to get in there and because somebody's a different party, I'm not going to work with them. You brought everybody to the table. And in there in District 26, you've gotten feedback from both parties because you're like at the end of the day, I'm here for the people. I'm not here
Yeah.
to just do whatever my national party says. I'm going to fall in line. And we just saw that with House Bill 2. People were breaking party lines based on what a president was saying, and they were listening to the people that were saying, "Here's what we want." And you did such a great job of that. But why is that so important when it comes to state and local politics as opposed to national politics?
Well, elections are local, and we are talking about decisions that can have positive or, in some cases, negative effects on the people we see every day in the grocery store or at the gas station. And so, the reason I feel such a great responsibility as senator is because I am truly here to answer to the folks that sent me to the state capitol. And so I will never get caught up in the national politics or even the divisiveness of the times today, because there is truly more that unites us than divides us. We all want the same things. We want to
There
live
you
in a
go.
safe community. We want our children to have good quality schools to attend. We want to make sure that our property values increase instead of decrease. And we really want community that reflects the values of the people. And I know every senator thinks they live in the best or represent the best Senate district, but Senate District 26 is just so special. It's full of
Yeah.
hardworking, responsible people. And I get emails every day to my Senate emails from Republicans and Democrats in my district. And I've got one bill that's coming up where I have support, and they will identify with the party, but they are all telling me to vote yes for the same things and no for the same things.
Yeah.
And that has been the thing that has surprised me the most in this.
Yeah, and when you look at other local politicians, our friend Gene McGee, the mayor of Ridgeland, who has been an outspoken Republican, but is endorsed by Democrats all the time because for the same
Mhm.
reasons. He listens to the people that live in his town and say, "Look, here's what we need done," and he doesn't care what the national party is doing. He does what the
Yeah.
people that put him there asked him to work on, and it is amazing how far that can take you in politics.
Oh, that's
But
right.
I do have a couple of questions. I like this first one. This is Jarvis Lyles. He's a senior here, plays football on the Velma Jackson Falcons football team. And
Okay.
he asked, when you have your stance on local issues, what are your main priorities to address community concerns?
Well, the main priority for me is public safety. I did not mention um, that I was a city court judge for 12 years. And I understand the importance of a safe community. I find out what's happening across District 26 mainly through HOA meetings. I have
Oh,
every HOA that I'm aware of in my district that meets regularly. I have their meetings on my calendar.
that's awesome.
I was at one on Saturday afternoon. Uh, they meet normally at the gazebo, which I love those. We get some fresh air, get to know each other. But they met via Zoom this past Saturday, and I just listened to their concerns. And they are mainly concerned about public safety, whether it's having better lighting in the neighborhood or cameras at the entrance, not so much that something has happened, but ways to prevent it. What I think affected us so much from COVID is that we became disconnected as a community. And so the neighborhood watch train of mind that we once had, I think we lost that somewhere along the way. And most of our HOA members are wanting to get back to that, informing neighbors when they're going to be out of town or saying, hey, look out for my kid who's going to be walking home from school and I'll be working late. And so, what I've really focused on is those community issues. And thinking about those priorities. And so most of my appropriation bill requests are for funding for better lighting, sidewalks, cameras in our neighborhoods. And that's
That's
how I
awesome.
prioritize those because having a safer community helps our schools and helps the community as a whole.
Awesome. Well, I got time for one
Yeah.
more from the students. This is Derek Mitchell.
Okay.
He's a junior, well, one member of our drum line here at Velma Jackson. And he asked, with all these things you have your hands in, how do you manage the time and not get overwhelmed?
Well, I'm still working on not being overwhelmed, but I am a planner. I've always been a planner. I get up early, and I schedule things. And I keep a really good calendar of where I'm supposed to be. Time management is something that I learned probably in middle school. Just, I have this much time in a day. These are the things that I want to accomplish. And I keep a checklist and I'm just marking things off the list every day. I even schedule time to read emails, to respond to emails, to call back constituents. It's a little bit harder now that we're in session because things are so fluid.
Oh,
Like
big
we would
time.
normally go in on Mondays at 4. Today we're going in at 2, which means our caucus meeting got moved up. And so when things are moving, and I'm still running a business, I have 2 small children, but I really do schedule things. My husband and I keep a shared calendar. And we put everything on that calendar so that I can keep track of things. It is sometimes hard to get overwhelmed because I am fully committed to whatever I'm doing at the time. I want to give it, my all in all. But having a good schedule, making sure that I'm taking care of myself, getting enough sleep. That's relative, and eating right. And then just having a commitment to doing my best and then not over promising.
Big time. Well, we're
Yeah.
almost out of time, and we thank you so much for joining us. But before we go, I just think this is such an important thing to mention. I got all young men. We got some other young people watching with us that are about to be old enough to vote.
Oh,
And I have never in my life told anybody who to vote for because one, I'm not smart enough to give somebody good advice anyway. But issues that are important to me are not issues that are important to everybody else. But at the end of the day, I have a huge problem when people tell me they don't vote. I don't
mm,
give a crap who somebody votes for, but you need to have your butt in that polling place voting for somebody, especially these young black kids. As we celebrate Black History Month and people like Medgar Evers, people literally were killed for people to have the right to vote in our state
that's
and in this
sad.
country. So,
Mhm.
exercising that right is so important. And it's not just voting for the president. Yeah, go vote for the president because we have that right. But vote for your state offices, vote for your local offices, vote for your mayor, vote for your county supervisor, vote for your judges, and know who those people are because that's the people that are going to affect your life. The president of the United States doesn't have anything to do with the street being paved outside your neighborhood. The
That's
president of
right.
the United States doesn't have anything to do with business taxes and land titles that are going on in your county or anything that has to do with your local school system. Those are things that are decided in local elections. When we had our local elections a few months ago, in my city ward in city of Flowood, only 187 people voted for our alderman there in the city of Flowood. And that is absolutely ridiculous. So as these kids get ready to get registered to vote, why is it so important that they are always there voting for somebody and making their voice heard for all of these elections, no matter what the election is?
Elections are so important. Just like you said, local elections are the most important because they are going to have the most effect on your everyday life. And just think about those who sacrifice so much so that most of us, especially as African Americans, could have the right to vote. And then you are not truly involved and engaged in your community if you're not voting. And you have a responsibility as a citizen to participate. You often hear people complain about how bad things are or how they could be better. Voting in every election could change that. My grandpa had this saying when we were kids, before we could even vote. He would say, I don't care if there's only the dog catcher on the ballot, I'm going to the polls and I'm going to vote for the person that I think will do the best job. And
There
if
you
you
go.
lead with that, you're going to get involved in the process. What I saw in my election was that people want to be engaged. I canvassed, I knocked on doors. And when I started canvassing, I was a bit apprehensive because I thought, folks really bills. I was completely wrong about that. People wanted to be engaged, and I ran into people who said, I haven't voted in years because I don't think that my vote makes a difference. And I said, well, at the very least, if you vote, especially if you vote for me, and I do something against what you think is right, you can hold me accountable. Call me up.
There
I
you go.
voted for you, and you made this decision. Explain it to me. And that's some very good advice I got from our lieutenant governor. He said to me, he was like, you're going to have some tough votes. If you vote away and people question it, make sure you can explain it. And if you can do that, you'll be okay. You just need to make sure that the people can understand that I may have taken this position. You may not agree with it, but these were the reasons behind that. Because I am really there to make sure that I represent and vote in a way that has the most positive effect for Senate District 26 and for our state.
All right, we lost the sound there at the end. But I think one thing that we can all agree on, and I don't care what somebody's beliefs are, at the end of the day, everybody needs to have their voice heard, no matter who you are.
Hmm. That's right.
And I encourage all of our young people, all the people that'll see this later in Ridgeland and Madison, go to your city clerk, get registered to vote. And don't let
Yes.
anybody influence who you decide to vote for. And kids ask me all the time. They ask me, who should I vote for? That's for you to decide.
Right.
And see, you need to go and see what's important to you, what these people stand for, and make your voice heard. If it's different than mine, that's fine. But you need
Mhm.
to have your voice heard in the
Right.
process. And
And
again,
come visit us at the state capitol. We'd love to have y'all. We've had students from different school districts already, but it's so great to see young people there experiencing an actual legislative session. So I'd love to have y'all. Let me know when or if you can come, and I'll make sure we make some good accommodations for you all.
now, when are you guys in session for those that want to come by and see?
Okay, so we are in session until April 5th, this session. Mondays in the Senate, we start later normally. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, we gavel in 10 a.m. You can have a Senate tour, and I can help schedule any of this for you. We can reserve a room for you so that you can have your students wait, and different senators, House members can come by and speak to you. And then you can come sit up in the gallery and just witness us debate and vote on different bills.
Yeah, and like I said, the Capitol is 100% open to the public all the time
Hmm.
because you voted, your vote put them there, so you have the right to go up there and watch. So,
That's right.
really, really cool process. So hopefully everybody get to see that. But I know you got to get back to work, and we thank you so much for fitting us in your schedule.
Yes, sir.
And we appreciate the Kenton Tiger being with us in Falconland today. But my friend, Senator Kamesha Mumford from Senate District 26 here in the state of Mississippi, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thanks for having me. Have a good day.
Talk to you soon.
Bye bye.